such ambitious change. Today on the Melting Point, we're being joined by an analyst that's going to be discussing everything that has to do with these reforms. I would also go into the educational sector, since he is in the educational sector, to give us a brief lowdown of his perspectives on this. Who am I talking about? His name is Dr. Wanabasi Udo. He is okay, I'm gonna get that right. I'm going to get that right. His name is Wanabasi Udo. He's a lecturer at the Department of Public Administration at Akwa Ibom State University and political and public affairs analyst. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Sharon. Good morning, wholesaler.
Yeah, nice to see you, brother.
Good morning, listener.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here again.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, talking about these reforms, how can the government, in the long run, we're talking 10 to 15 years according to the World Bank, first of all, trying to know if you share in the sentiments with World Bank. Also, we would like to know if how the government can balance the need for economic reforms with protecting vulnerable citizens who are most affected by these changes.
Let me start this way, Sharon. The World Bank and IMF are the major determinants of world economy in all countries of the world. And once you put your hand in that oil, let me describe it as oil. It is either you lick it or you hold your hand carefully, otherwise you stain everywhere. So what do I mean by that? I mean that once you go to IMF and take a loan, you are in for it. Your people will carve it out, because you have to have a collateral to be able to pay off the loan that you've gotten from IMF. And IMF or the World Bank will give you the parameters with which you're going to pay off this loan. And they won't come out and tell you that Nigeria is in a mess, or rather something. So, but they'll put it in such the ears of people and said, you guys have to wait for 10 to 15 years before your economy will balance up. To me, as from World Bank, will spread a period of 15 years, and who knows what the amount is and the interest and so on and so forth. So, but what I want to say is this: Nigeria as a country ought to know that there is a short-term, long-term, and medium-term processes of doing things. If you have put us in what the World Bank now tells us that we have to wait for 15 years before the economy takes its roots, what have you done about the short-term and the medium-term processes? For what will people eat? What will people do? How will people live in the short-term period and in the medium-term period before we get to that long-term period that the World Bank is projecting for Nigeria to come to limelight? But it seems that Nigeria has not even done anything apart from just getting involved with the World Bank and World Bank telling them this is what you are going to do, and they just fall into and sign all the documents and so on and so forth. It's not good enough for a country like Nigeria to become a prey to a World Bank. Nigeria is, with all the human and natural resources that we have in this country, we are well able to survive. But we are not productive. We are a consuming nation. We are into consumption. All we have is to consume. Even sometimes they take a loan from World Bank and IMF and other China and so on and so on. And most times those loans are consumed. You don't see any meaningful, productive project and venture that they put these things. So, okay, how do I mean by consuming? You take a loan and you repair roads. You take a loan and you
pay salaries.
And pay salaries. That's consumption now. You take a loan and you pay. What else? You buy cars for senators and the House of Reps member. That's consumption. Or you take a loan and build a mansion for the president, the vice president, and the rest of the people. Is that how to utilize? Is that how to make use of a loan? You know. And then the World Bank is now giving us 15 years. 15 years, how many years will I be? If I am this old now. What age will I be 15 years from now? And what age will my children be? You know? And so it is causing depression, gradual depression in the heart of the people when people think about this. Sometimes they may not know the impact of that statement on the top level, and it's not good enough at all. It's not good at all.
Yeah, it's laughable to understand that the World Bank, IMF, and other world financial institutions are not very friendly with Africa and other third world countries. But I am also worried why the National Economic Committee in Nigeria, for instance, have failed the people by not actually, postulating policies or formulating ideas or ideologies that will sustain such loans that we often take from honestly miserable or third world countries, which we shouldn't do so. What does this translate to our national economy when the National Economic Advisory Council have failed in their duties? What's the impact of this?
How do you know that they have failed? Perhaps they have come up with report, because there's no way you set up a committee and give them terms of reference to carry out, and they will not do it. They will do exactly what you want them to do, and then hand over the report to you. But because sometimes government would try to put on an image that looks like they are very, like the ways Professor Ways electoral reforms committee, and they came up with reports since about 17 years ago. What about the National Constitution Conference that President John, governors, former senators, and so to Abuja paid so much for their accommodation, for their feeding, for their welfare, and so on. And those people did a very good work. At the end of that conference, report was presented to the presidency. Up to now, have they talked about that report? They've not. They've not put it into practice. So I wouldn't blame the commissions or the conferences or the committees that government has said. They are just telling the world that we care, we're interested in your welfare, and so these are the preliminary things we are put in place for this country to get better. At the end of it all, they will not use it. So I don't put the blame to the National Economic Committee, because I want to be sure that they would have done their bit and so on.
All right, thank you so much. Now I want to take you back to that question that I asked, because I don't think that you responded to that, because I asked you to at once. So the second question, now before I go into that, the Vice President mentioned still in that meeting that there's no way out. We just had to pass through this for us to get to where we want to be in the next probably 10 to 15 years, just as the World Bank has said. So if we have to pass through this and the government is aware of it, I mean, there should be a way to cushion and balance it up, because it was evident. The president has said it, that he knows that these reforms will be painful. So what are some of the things, how can they balance up the pains of Nigerians and the need to reform?
Sharon, that's why I was talking about short term, medium term, and long term preparations towards this matter. But from the statement of the Vice President, you see that there's nothing on ground at all to cushion the effect of these 15 years, which is long-term process. There's nothing on ground to show that there is a medium to at least take care of the citizens until this 15 years is achieved. So I want to take you back to, this morning I just tried to read through the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, and I discovered that many countries of the world don't seem to, they only put on a cloak, cover up, kind of veil, that they look like a virgin, look like a veil of the people. But if you unveil them, you discover that they are lions, not a sheep. How do I mean by that? Let me take you back to the Bible days. In Egypt, there was a time Egypt was, if you read the world politics, history of the world politics, you discover that there was a time Egypt was a world power before the Russian, the USS, Soviet Union, before its collapse. Yeah. So, and then now it happens to the rest of the world. During the time of Pharaoh and Joseph, I describe it as Honorable Joseph, Joseph Isaac, what is his father's name? His father's name was Jacob. So I described Joseph as Honorable Joseph Jacob Isaac. So during the time of Honorable Joseph Jacob Isaac in Egypt, that vision was like spiritual, but in translating it into economic practice in the country, in a physical world country because Egypt is in Africa. So we're not being spiritual now, we're being economic. We are looking at economic dimensions of how to cushion the effect of hardship, amongst the people and the public. Now, somebody will say that was Bible days. It happened here in Africa. It was in Africa because Egypt is still in Africa. So 7 years of abundance, just like we had 7 years of abundance some years back in Akwa Ibom State, and people were buying Rolls Royce, people were buying SUVs and buying things like that. Today they cannot fuel those vehicles. During that time, that season, there was abundance of food everywhere in Egypt and even in the world. The only person who knew how to make use of that abundance period was this man I had described. He built silos, he built warehouses everywhere across Egypt and stored in goods, bought those goods at very cheap prices and stored and kept them for 7 years. Nigeria has 8 years, 4 years tenure, and this one was 7 years. He stored in those goods for 7 years. The next 7 years, when the next 7 years began, there was drought, there was hardship, there was lack, there was poverty, until he now started selling out. He didn't give out as palliative to the people. He sold it to the people until their money finished. He depleted all the income in Egypt, and in almost the entire world now began to travel to Egypt to buy goods, and he sold it. The people now said, our money has finished. Now they say, okay, bring your land and give to the government and then take food. At the time their land finished, they brought their children and brought themselves. At the end, said, we cannot die in this kind of poverty. There's something I'm trying to drive at. I will mention that. So they were free-born citizens of Egypt and the rest of the world, but they now gave themselves to government and became born servants, became slaves. They sold themselves to government and became slaves. Therefore, so that the government took them and put in the different farms and so on and so forth. And look at this caveat. Joseph brought his brothers and put them in the where they call Goshen, where government make sure that they planted garden, watered it, and so on. So had good houses and so on. What am I trying to say? I'm saying this to say that who knows whether our government is the line that